Alright, so I was initially going to just do this video in two parts, where I would start sort of just building the model now, but what I thought I'd do instead is I'd separate it into just a section, which is this section, dedicated to basically modelling some of the modelling tools in Blender. This is my vanilla Blender, I don't have any of my add-ons. This is my normal Blender, if you like. This is my normal configuration where I have all my various add-ons, hard ops and box cutter, some kit ops, and I've got machine tools in here as well, amongst other things. I've got quite a few add-ons. Some are free, but a few are bought. Yeah, so like here I've got hard ops and decal machine tools and mesh machine. But in this particular instance, the ones I'll be focusing on will be mesh machine, hard ops and box cutter. Again, I find those very useful, and I'll show you how building this with those add-ons is much more streamlined than using the vanilla Blender. So with that said, let's get to it. And then I'm just gonna clear that collection out, so I'm starting fresh. I shall turn on my shortcut keys, smack them in the middle somewhere. Right, and with Blender, I'm just going to toggle into tweak mode because I like using in that. With Blender, there's always more than one way to achieve a result, and so the first thing is, if we sort of take our log, there's multiple ways you can do it. Now you can either use the QBlocker add-on, which I've got a link to, so I could use a circle and a shift and roll that down to 6, and then I can hold shift, let go and drag up and turn the shade into flat, click, right click, there's one. So just move that along. You can add in a mesh, you can add in a cylinder, and you can make it 6 sides like that. Go into mode GZ1, and now like that, that is the. Now if I add a cylinder again, and that's got the pivot in the middle, or I can add in a circle, give it 6 sides, and change the fill type to N-gon. Then I can add a solidify modifier to that, make it 1 and make that 2. So they're all the same, but they're all being constructed different ways. And if we go into individual origins, select everything, I'm going to RY90, put them all like that way. I'm just going to move these GX to move them along. GX, GX. Right, so we've got the circle. Now the circle, its length I can set by setting the length of that. So if I want that to be 8 meters long, I could do that. Now if I want that to be a certain size, I can come in, go into the item. First things first, I'm going to apply rotation and scale, so that when I'm looking at this axis, it's doing it right, otherwise it'll go wrong. So for example like there, and I choose to scale on the Z axis, that's alright. That, you see, I'm saying scale on the Z axis, but it's moving it up on the X axis because it's been rotated. Same there. so you have to bear that in mind. And the reason you tend to apply the rotation is then you say, okay, well, what's if I want to scale that on this axis, which is the global Z? The only way to start figuring that out is to do that, change that to local, and say, okay, you've got to scale it on the x-axis. And it can get a bit confusing if I tend not to use the gizmos, just for speed and clarity on the viewport. So again, I just select everything, apply rotation and scale. And now when I scale on the Z, it's on the global Z. Change that back to global so I don't get into a mess. So if I RY, if we're talking about global and local, you change that to local. And I can scale on the X, global, that happens. Or I can scale on the X local, and that happens. Now if you're in local mode and you scale on the X, then press X again, it goes global. Likewise, if you're in global mode, you scale on the X, X again, and that'll toggle into local. So it's handy to know in terms of your rotation and that. Right, so let's scale that Shift X. Scale Shift X 0.3. And let's see, so we've got 0.5 and 0.6, 0.5 to 0.6. So I want 0.62 there actually, to make that a bit longer, and then again apply the scale. Now with this one, where are you? This guy, if you're scaling on the X, you're scaling from the middle. So if you sort of want to line it up with something in the background, if we go there, let's move that over, and we want to align that to this length, scaling it is sort of mainly guesswork. So what I would do in that instance is go to vertex, GX, snap to there, then I'd actually just go into edit mode, select that face, G, X, and snap to there. And then you can just set the origin back to geometry. Whereas that, you can see it's 8 meters long. So on that one, all I have to do there is just put 8, and that would be the same size. GX, snap it there, GY, so you can see it line it up like that. And the same with there, you can scale it on the X, and you could more or less line it up, so you can GX, hide that, GX, snap to there, go 1, and then you just scale that on the X. And if you sort of get your cursor to here, you can scale X, and you're more or less dragging it to where it needs to be. And there you are, that's 8 meters long. So all of those achieve the similar result. So just something to be aware of. So we'll just take this guy, we'll put him back in the here, and we'll go in the top view, and we're now going to build our sort of logs, and we'll only be using basic keys here, so we just G, and I'm going to move that, and again I can use X -2, and I press Shift R now, it'll move it again and again, and GY -3, right, and GX2, push it back, yeah. Position, I'm going to make that -5 actually, okie dokie. Now again, there are multiple ways you can add arrays here. You can add an array modifier, So I can add a modifier, add an array, change it from X to Z, like that. So, or I can Shift D, or Z90, GY 0.5 minus GX 0.5. There we go. And I'm going to get rid of that array, or I can come in here. Now I know how high it is. It's 0.62 meters. So I could select everything, which is just that one because it's a solidify. Shift D, Z 0.62, then Shift R, Shift R, Shift R, and that's the difference between them. Is that is what you'd call destructive, and that isn't. If I hide those, I'm just down to that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add an empty to use a mirror with, because I don't want to affect the origin of this, because it'll mess things up. So I'm just going to then add in a mirror modifier, and I change it to use the empty and make it on the y-axis, and I can scale that make that 7. And I'll do the same for that. I can add a modifier, or what I can do with that is I can just duplicate it if I wanted to. Do Shift D, and I want to change that minus 4.5 to well, that's not working, so 3.5, 2.5. Well, that tells me it's not perfectly lined up in terms of being equal, but again we can address that later. So again, all of these ways produce different results, but if I now try to boolean these, I could join them. If I now try to boolean them and do Control plus, you can see it just doesn't work. And the reason for that is because we've got some issues. And the issues are that these are not really solid geometry, and it also creates interior faces. So what I can do is I can hover over, I can go here, I can apply that one, I can apply that one, I can apply that one, select that, I can apply all because it's just a solidify. But then I need to go in to edit mode, select everything, merge B, deselect everything, and I need to select interior faces. So between each log there's a face, and delete those faces. Come out of edit mode, go into there, do the same thing, merge B, deselect, go into wireframe, so I can see what's happening. Interior faces, delete the faces, out of wireframe, out, and now that is okay, and I can apply that. I can delete the cutter, and I can actually delete that, that's no longer needed. Go in, merge B again to get rid of any other. Right, and so there we have the sort of the full thing. Now sort of in the actual model these are offset, but for these particular examples it doesn't really matter. And now I want to make this a symmetrical mesh. So looking at this, that's y plus, y minus, x plus, x minus. So I've got to go mesh, symmetrize. I've got to go x minus to x plus. No, y minus. You see this isn't working or not? The reason why that isn't working is because of where the origin is. So I need to come here and I need to actually set the origin to the cursor. Now, with everything selected, I can symmetrize and it'll do what we expect it to do. So we want x minus to x plus. Select everything. Mesh. Symmetrize y minus to y plus. Right, now we've got an actual symmetrical mesh. Right. And then we can start adding details to that if we wanted. And if we want to add in a window, again we would create a cube. You can either do it that way or you can use a plane cube. The difference with these is plane cube, that puts the origin there. And if I add in a corner cube, that puts the origin on a point, on a vertex, rather than on a face. Sometimes that's preferable, sometimes that's preferable. The advantage with that is I can scale Y, scale X, scale Z, and I'm working from that one. Whereas, so if I've got that lined up, say to here, and we just move it here, say we wanted it there exactly, and I scale X now, that's easier to control than having that. Again, with things scale X, you're sort of moving it on the X, and then you're scaling on the X, then you're moving it on the X, and well, you can see where I'm going. So I often prefer using a point as the origin when I'm modelling. Just easier. So let's scale X, bring that in, scale Z, put it here, call that the window. I'm going to scale Z a bit more, scale X, just move that to where I want it, say there. I'm not really bothered about how big it is on the y-axis. I mean, I can scale it on the y just to make it more readable. And again, I'll just apply the scale there for the sake of it. Don't need to, but I am doing. Right. So then I can just select that and Control minus. Now, if I want to sort of duplicate this, I can add a modifier, add a mirror, use that, and now you've got that. Now with Bool tool, as opposed to hard ops, it sets the viewport display to bounds. You might prefer that to be wire, so you can actually see the two boxes rather than just the bounds of all of the geometry used. So just something to be aware of. And then if we wanted to add detail to that object, we can do. Doing Control R for a cut there, because I know I want window panes. Right, so similar thing again, or you can just add a straight cube, move it on the y-axis, scale on the x, GZ. Click select, Control minus, there's your door frame. And then I can Control A, visual geometry to mesh, which will apply all the modifiers. Select that, Control I and delete. And again go in there, A, merge B. And you can see we've got rid of two vertices there. So that's sort of how you'd build the geometry using the standard tools. And if I want to add an actual door unit there, actually I'm in edit mode, I should have been in object mode. All I did there was just separate the one that was selected because the cube itself was selected. Go into wireframe, scale X, be about GZ. I want this to be slightly bigger than the opening because we want to join with it, so we don't want it narrower than it, because if it's narrower than it then you're going to get a gap. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to apply scale because I always apply scale. Scale on the Y. Right. Now I basically want to create my legs, and again there's multiple ways of doing this. If we're using this, I can delete that face and press I, and then press B for boundary. Get it like that, and I'm only interested in the top here, and then I'm going to scale on the X, and then I am going to bridge faces, select that and delete that face, and then join these. I'm not saying this is the most efficient way of doing it, I'm just showing you there are multiple ways of doing it. And then I can select that, I can extrude it up, E return, scale on the X, make sure it's medium point, it's trying to scale on individual origins so it won't go anywhere. Extrude that out, grab those two, GY, and that would be your door frame. So you select that, and if you want to get it closer you can just select those two faces, GZ, move them up a bit, select and Control plus, and again you can apply all, delete that, there we go. That's one way of doing a door. I'm just going to hide that. Another way you could do it, where you add plane, like that, call that the thing, there's your base. I'm going to set the origin to the cursor, move that in a bit to there, scale X. Just use an extrude here. Most of the stuff you can do, you'll do with these few basic commands: extrude, insert, things like that. Control click, E. Now that'll go on the normal, but you can specify the global axis as well by pressing that instead, if you want to go it a specific way. And again, we go to mesh, symmetrize, and this time we want X minus to X plus, and there's another way of doing the doorway. Or you can add a cube, scale Z, scale Y, apply the scale, GZ, use Control R to add a loop cut there, and Control B to bevel. About there. Control R to add a loop cut. Control B to bevel. Control R to add a loop cut here. Add a loop cut there. Select those two faces. E. Take them down. Switch to 3D cursor. Scale Z0. Go into Effect Edge mode. Select those two. GY. There we go. And if you want to change it, go into point mode, box select, and I'm just going to scale those on the X, make them bigger. And there's another door. So I say multiple ways of doing it. So that's all using native Blender. So having done with the native Blender, you can stop there if you wish and then move on to the video stream of me building the actual model, or you can continue watching and I'll show you how using the add-ons of HardOps, Box Cutter and Mesh Machine can streamline this work a bit. We still suffer with the same issues for things like booleans, because that's just a boolean thing, and you just have to accept that, really. So I've got my HardOps. Alt W will take me to Box Cutter. HardOps also has all manner of other things which you can use, and it has a Q menu, so I can like add an array, press the X key, and then 1, roll the mouse button, and there you go. There's how quickly that was built. And before I do anything else now, I'm actually just going to apply that. So I can Q, I can select that, Q, operations, sharpen, and I can control click, and that applies the modifiers, which is determined by which of these modifiers are set up. There's all sorts of things available in this. So again, I still have to do the same thing, merge by distance, go into wireframe, I'm going to select my interior faces and delete the faces. So that's that. Now I'm going to select everything, and I just move that out on the X to about there, say. Scale X, Y, get a decent size. And now if I want to mirror it, I just do that. And then I can Shift D, RZ90, go into edit mode, select everything, GY, Scale X, like that, and then GZ.16 to move it up half the width of a log, and then again I can apply all, and I'm ready to rock. So select that, do Control plus, like that, and it hops union boolean, and I'll choose it to be exact, and then again I can apply all to that, hide the cutters. Now let's see if that's worked, and see if it's got any interior faces, and it hasn't, so that should be okay for future use. So we do a 3, I can go into Box Cutter with Alt W, my cut is aligned to the view, I can add a door, shift click. Now that's telling me there's actually an issue here, because let's change that to exact. That does suggest there is something with the other things that hasn't taken. So I'm going to select everything and merge B, change that back to fast and exact. That's what it was. I hadn't had merged my points. So again, let's add a window, put it about here. That could be my window, say. Offset moves it, shift click to accept it. I'll move it so I can Q, ever scroll, select that. I'm just going to reposition it. Like that. Select that, Alt X, put the window on the other side. Go into edit mode, add the links. There we go. And then I can just again hide the cutters. Go in, merge B, that one's okay. So now I can come here and I can do the window. So this bit would be the same. In, and now you can either E or I can hold I and press Control. I and Control, E. So select these two edges. Well, I can actually just select these faces. Scales at 0.6. So these four faces. Scale X, Y. Scale Y 0.6. And then I want to copy that across, so Alt X and switch. And that's how fast the machine symmetrizes. So you pull up Alt X, it gets you the little thing, and you just flick. It's great. And that's how quickly you can do it using the add-ons. Another thing you can do is if I wanted to create a gable end here, I can come in here, I can select that face, Q, Shift Curve Extract, and then I can just take these two edges, scale X0, make sure I'm at medium point, scale X0, merge B, and there we are, gable end, quickly done. Very handy. And the same thing if you decide you want to then use this gable end to create a beam. I can do Q, shift click, go up like that. I can scale on the Y axis. Let's go into medium point, set the origin to geometry, scale on the Y like that. And I want an overhang. That's dead easy because we just select that. GG, C, like that. Alt X flip, guaranteeing it's there. And so there's your overhang. Click, Alt X, bump, click. There, because that's set this. You can either do that or I can just do origin to cursor and just do Alt X modifier. And you can see how quickly it's being worked with those add-ons. So that's why I tend to encourage people to buy the add-ons. It's just easier. So that sort of ends this video, sort of showing what we'll be going through and showing why I'm such a big fan of those add-ons. Next up, it will be the modelling stream to rebuild the whole thing completely.